Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you. My name is Mohamed Massaquoi. You're here with us for talent and diversity, overcoming adversity at work and in life. And this is a topic that's very special to me. I'll dive in why. Faced some crazy adversity prior to 2020, but now 2020 has presented adversity for everyone. And I'll give you a little bit of background so you know who's speaking to you. Originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, by way of Liberia, where my family escaped also early 80s. Fortunate that they were here to make it here safe and healthy. And that led to having me. And I grew up as an athlete, which led to me playing football at the University of Georgia, where I was there from 2005 to 2008, team captain. And that journey led me to playing in the NFL, where I was a second round pick for the Cleveland Browns. And what's interesting about playing for the Browns, especially at that time, it was a very chaotic situation, a lot of change, like we're having in Cleveland or like we're having here in 2020. And as a young pro, one of the things that I now look back on is that I had the wrong perspective going through that time. Something that I was brought in for was to add value. But when I looked at the situation, all I saw was the dysfunction. And I think that's something that people are struggling with right now, to where they're looking at the dysfunction that's going on in their companies or just in life in general. And they forget that because they're talented, they're actually supposed to add value there. And so I years professionally. When I retired, I took a job in finance at Morgan Stanley, and I worked there until my life changed in 2017. If you look at my left hand, I became an amputee. And that was just one of the biggest changes that I never anticipated going through. I was involved in an TV accident. And the interesting thing about when disruption happens, typically you don't really have a plan for it. It just kind of throws you off. But because we're all still living, we're supposed to make it through. Even though we don't have a strategy, we have to respond in a way that not only sets ourselves up for success, but sets our teammates up for success, and also sets the whole organization up at large. It's a domino effect. So if you start to move in the right direction, you're able to overcome that adverse situation. And if you move in the wrong direction or have certain missteps, typically you have a road that you may not from. And one of the things that I realized going through that process, I ended up having 12 surgeries over the course of, let's say, 45 days. And the thing about adversity is once it happens, it's very difficult to prepare for it. The work that you've done prior to an adverse situation typically determines if you make it through or not. And so for me, the reason that I was able to have 12 surgery was just the physical shape that my body was in prior to that event happening. And so the surgeon felt very comfortable that I could withstand it, which ultimately led to me saving my thumb, the most important part of the hand. And so as you think about your organizations, think about the areas that you're most prepared to withstand different things, and so that you keep the most important parts of your organization intact, and the things that will naturally fall off, you're more able to let those things go. But then the other thing that I realized is just the importance of time, the importance of urgency. I kept hearing cold blue when I was in the hospital. And what cold blue means, if you're not familiar, that means that somebody unfortunately has passed away. And so the nurse would come in to draw my blood twice a day, let's say once at 3 p.m., once at 3 a.m. And we had this conversation of every time you hear that, a person is no longer with us. And I would walk around the hallways, and a life that was there the day before you would see would be pristine. And so we don't know when cold blue is going to happen, either an opportunity in life, with our organizations, where we're going to lose out on the thing that we do at a high level. So it's important to be very intentional. You spend time. It's important to be very intentional about how you're trying to add value, and it's very intentional about how you move forward through challenges. Because if you're still functioning, you have an opportunity to add value, and you're not gone. But as you would imagine, when you go through an adverse situation like that, especially when you lose a body part, the mental challenges that you face. And if I'm being honest with you, every range of emotion, every range of mental stress was something that I something that I had to fight through, something that I had to overcome. And typically people mention mental health and they say it very light. But the reality is that there's people dealing with very traumatic things, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's night sweats, whether it's fear, whether it's just moving forward as a lesser version of themselves. And so as a person that has gone through that as a result of my accident, I highly encourage you to go find the right help. And if I'm truly honest with you, these were things that I struggled with in a different capacity prior to my accident, even as a professional athlete, but I never addressed it. And I always think back on how much more at a higher level will I have functioned if I understood how to go get the right help. But then once you move forward mentally and you're in a sharp place, at times you have to detach just to take inventory of what's going on around you. A lot of people through COVID right now, or race relationships, or just the changes that 2020 has presented to us, they want to just charge through. They want to move forward, business as usual. But it's not business as usual. I don't think we'll ever go back to a situation where it's business as usual. We're trying to reinvent, redo, rediscover what we should do moving forward. And the only way I think we can do that is to actually pause and step back how we should move forward. What are the areas that we can move forward to? What are the areas that we're uniquely qualified to add value in ways that other people aren't, that lend itself to a competitive advantage versus being a commodity and presenting whatever everyone else has presented. And part of that is once you identify what that thing is, it's important to go further develop yourself, further develop the capabilities that you need, because sometimes the area that you want to go to is not that you can't get there, it's just that you haven't done the things to prepare for it. And in doing so, you take the long road, and most people don't take the long road. So you see that as you get to this journey and you go through these hardships, that there's not that many people there with you. And so that sets the foundation for our conversation. As someone who focuses on organizational change through my company, the VESSOL, but I have two supremely talented individuals with me, Crystal Williams from FLEETCOR and Gloria Styles from AvidXchange. And so it's truly, truly, truly a pleasure to have you join us. And something that we started to talk about before we came out here was just the importance of mental health. And it's something that in 2020, many people are struggling mentally, but many people don't know how to address it and how to deal with it. Gloria, if you could just tell us a little bit more about how you're approaching mental health and how your company's been able to help your phenomenal talent through this time.
Sure. Thanks, Mohamed, and thanks for having me. So I would say that today's unique circumstances make it increasingly important for employers to make mental health part of the conversation and to make it okay. And some of the things that I saw as, March came around and we went to, working remotely, is that we saw a spike in teammates reaching out to our employee assistance program for depression and anxiety as we looked at that compared to last year. So there was, significant increase there. There was also an elevation in our prescription drug usage for anxiety disorders and depression. And so the first thing that I'll say is that, the data is really there to help you. There's a lot of information, that your HR, benefits, total rewards team has to help you understand what's happening with your teammates. And that's like the technical data stat side of it. But I think the most important side is actually about leaders and teammates having genuine, authentic conversations, feeling like they can show up to work and truly be, their authentic selves so that they feel comfortable sharing when something doesn't feel right. So leaders feeling those nuances that through a screen can be so difficult. If you're in the office and somebody walks in and they're having a bad day, you can feel that immediately and you can, pull that person aside and talk to them. But on a screen, it's very difficult. So some of the things that we've been doing at AvidXchange is consistently having, company meetings, spending time with our people leaders separate from other teammates to make sure that our people leaders are taking care of themselves and their own mental health, because not only do they have to lead, other teammates, they matter to us as well. So spending time with our people leaders, and remembering that mental health in the workplace is really people-driven work. Data is there to help us, but it's the human-centered approach that really makes the biggest impact for our teammates, and having those necessary conversations around well-being.
So what does that look like for someone that's not in HR? If it's people-driven, how can a leader model this out through their behavior?
So first of all, I would say participating and getting involved in the resources that the organization is providing, typically through their HR department. Their communications department is also helping, to bring that information to them. So participating and educating themselves as much as possible to the resources, the tools that are out there, and knowing how to navigate and leverage the various benefits that are available to teammates. So it's important for the leaders to educate themselves, but then also to be able to talk to their teammates freely. And I think storytelling is the most powerful tool that anyone has at their disposal. Sharing when you're having a bad day. When your child comes into the room or your pet comes into the room, my cat Ronnie will probably jump on my lap at some point during this presentation, and not acting like it's this big negative thing, right? Like lean into that discomfort. And then that's when teammates will truly bring their full selves to work, because you're bringing your full self to work. So leveraging the resources, just being a human being.
And Krista, we spoke earlier, and you said that there were certain things that FLEETCOR that had in place. Like there were formal policies that were in place to help people through their mental health or wellness opportunities and struggle, whether it be tips of the days or wellness coaches. Talk about how that was the foresight to implement that, and how you get people to actually use those resources that are there for them.
Yes, well, as Gloria pointed out, the data helps you get started. And when we reviewed at least in the US, because we are a global company, when we reviewed our US population and what conditions were most common, we found a lot of people suffering from various mental health issues, anywhere from depression to bipolar disorder, etc. And so part of the policies we set up were to encourage the use of the proper medication for these ailments that people suffer from. So as an example, any antidepressant is free to all of our employees. We have an EAP where you can get coaching and counseling for free through the company, so that you can maintain your mental well-being as you're proceeding on through everyday life and or new stressors that happen as we're experiencing now during COVID. During COVID, we started sending out tips of the day, and they're very simple tips. It can be anywhere from remember to stand up from your chair and turn off your screen for 15 minutes between meetings so that you don't get burned out. It's go and make sure you get some sun on a nice, beautiful day, because the vitamin D works miracles for you. It's anywhere from remember, we have an EAP set up, and it's also, we have leadership huddles for leaders to talk about things they've experienced with their teams, and for HR to provide advice on how they can handle situations. And the thing that we tell the leaders is to remember to be vulnerable and empathetic. Those are two skills that are very, very important when you're approaching anything related to mental health. Be empathetic, and if you've ever struggled with something, be willing to share that, because that takes the stigma out of the conversation.
So I'm hearing that you're making a conscious effort to invest in this area to
Yes.
make sure that people are taken care of. I have a thought that wellness is correlated to capacity. If your wellness isn't at a certain level, the capacity to do anything from a performance standpoint will significantly decline. And then just the human element of leaders modeling out this behavior that they want their employees and their talent to follow. How have you seen leaders model it out? If it's a sunny day, where's the leader taking a call? Or if certain things are happening, how's the leader operating through that time?
Gloria, you want to start?
So when I take a look at our C-suite, they've done a phenomenal job, taking their 15-minute huddle with the organization from the walk that they're taking to kind of, just get out and stretch their legs a little bit. And so really modeling that behavior, participating with teammates, even in a happy hour at a time that works for the teammate, that's been really impactful. And just showing that human side. Even the rooms that they take the Teams meeting from, so you get to see a little bit about, what's behind them, what's on the wall, pictures of their children, so that it makes it okay for, other teammates. Because, one of the things that popped up that was really important is teammates were worried about, oh my gosh, my house is a mess. So I'm going to be, on these screens and people are going to be able to see my house. And so even just leveraging technology and teaching teammates, that you can blur your background, you can use custom backgrounds and show a little bit of like fun in your personality. All of those little things truly helped our leaders seem more humanized. And just our CEO lost 40 pounds in the middle of COVID. So his name is Mike Prager. He's actually going to be presenting during this panel at some point over the next couple of days. But he literally committed to losing 40 pounds and did. I probably packed on a good 5 to 10 pounds. So kudos to him, for his weight loss. But it's important to just get out and move, and that leaders are displaying that kind of behavior.
Yes, we have the same with our leaders doing their town halls or their huddles or their team meetings from outside to in their cars at the height of COVID because they needed the fresh air but didn't want to be out all the way out. So in the car with the windows down. So yes, modeling that behavior has become an important part of the culture.
So it almost seems that there's trust being built by helping people through their wellness and their mental health. Because it's when you bring somebody in, you almost get a chance to know them. And people have this perception that mental health is only the things that are on the far extremes of the outlier conditions. But it's just the everyday things that people need help with and people need comfort with, whether it be the background that you have or making sure that your house is clean. And a big thing that's popped up is just the presence of kids through this process. And there's a ton of working parents that have to be stressed in a certain capacity because they don't know how to be professional and how to be parents at the same time. And that's not an either or. You have to do both at a high level. How have you seen parenting take shape through this process as HR leaders?
Yeah, so I can pop in here real quick first. So what I've seen with working parents is just tremendous tenacity and grit, handling both what's happening in the workplace as well as what's happening with their children. And for some kids, depending on what school they go to, it's changing from week to week. And understanding, the technology that the schools are leveraging, like all of that takes a lot of time for them to learn. I personally don't have children. And so when our organization started a meetup group for working parents, I decided to join it. So that I could understand what that experience was like for a working parent. Because when you don't have kids, my house is pretty quiet during the day when I work. And so what is it like for people that don't have that same experience? And I learned a tremendous amount about, mom guilt and dad guilt and just what that feels like on a daily basis, and providing the right opportunities for teammates to network with each other, to pick up tips and tricks, best practices, to make this adversity feel a little bit less cumbersome, and come up with different ways of handling, what it's like on a day in, day out basis to have to deliver for the organization, but at the same time, be a parent and being at home with your kids.
Extract that a little more, because typically, leaders think that they should have all the answers, and sometimes it forces them to make decisions that they don't have firsthand insight on. So just the thought process of saying, hey, I don't identify with this situation, but I want to learn more. So I'm going to place myself in an environment to learn. Talk me through what you learned and what went into that decision.
Yeah, so it's not even just with working parents, even from a diversity and inclusion lens. I'm a Caucasian female, who's married. So that's my identity. So what I do is I leverage the teammates around me to understand their life story. So just understanding their perspective, how are people raised? What makes them remarkable? What are the challenges that they experience? And so that's a behavior for me that started, early on, before this, before COVID, to just better understand what's happening with our teammates. And then when this all started to happen, and I have teammates who report to me that have children, and of course, their kids are always coming in and saying hello. And but I wanted to also understand it from other teammates, our non-exempt population. So our hourly teammates that may struggle even harder because they may not even be able to afford the tutor that another teammate, may be able to afford. So what does that look like for that teammate? And so truly making sure that I'm a well-rounded HR professional, but that I'm also just doing the right thing as a human being and understanding the experience of the people that, that are around me every single day. So I learned a lot. One of the things that I'll share that I think was most unique was that parents felt the most guilt that when they're in the workplace and they're in the office and they stay late, they kind of don't know what they're missing out on. But when they're sitting at home, and some of you who are watching this right now may experience this, but when your child is knocking on the door and they want to come in and they're tapping at the door, that pressure and stress of, oh my gosh, I'm on a video, stop banging on the door. That was something that really stood out to me that I wouldn't have even thought about. But having spent time with these teammates and sharing the resources and looking at the resources that they're actively sharing with each other has been a really positive experience.
And if I could just add in, Gloria, what you're talking about is allyship, taking a cause that is not necessarily your own, learning about it, supporting the members who are a part of that group. And what we have tried to do here at FLEETCOR is make it okay, make it normal that children, dogs, cats, fish are going to be a part of the Zoom meeting, the video conference, the town hall. One of our leaders in our Europe office actually had one of his children in his town hall meeting with him, and the child had a part. The child's about 6 or 7, had a couple of lines to say to support FLEETCOR and to support all the other people with children out there. So we've tried again to make it just a part of the work environment. In these times, in any time, people should be allowed to bring their whole self to work, but especially now, we have to bring our whole selves to work because we are at home. Many of us are at home much of the time trying to get the work done. So it's very, very helpful if, as a leader, you can provide that comfort, the psychological comfort for your teammates to do what they need to do to balance both their home life and their work life.
And Krista, you have kids, and your kids are older now, but take me through the process of just being able to do both at a high level when you're trying to be a mom, but you also have a demanding job and you're rising up the ranks and you're remembering that other people are trying to do the same. As leaders listen to this, how can they make sure that, one, that they're doing the best job they can, but also support other people that are trying to do the same thing?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to be upfront about it. You have to let someone know, in my case it was the CEO, know that, look, I am balancing both of these things. I'm not going to let you down, but I'm also not going to let my family down. So when my kids were young, I had a variety of things that I would do to try to balance both. There would be times where I would say, okay, this is the time I am leaving today, and I have to leave today to do these such and such things at home, but I will get back online and finish what you need me to finish, and it will be in your inbox first thing in the morning as we've agreed. Also, when there were snow days, which is very rare in Atlanta, by the way, but we went through Snowmageddon and some other problems here in Atlanta where, school was closed for some unexpected times, and I brought the kids to work with me. And I'm fortunate enough that I have an office, and the kids would be under my desk reading, doing whatever it was they needed to do while I was doing whatever it was I needed to do. So again, it takes both parties. I needed to have a leader flexible enough to allow me to have the flexibility, but also I needed to say, look, I need this flexibility. So the communication is quite important if you're trying to balance everything. The other thing is look to your employer. Some employers, we're looking into it, do provide some sort of tutoring help as well as childcare support during these unique times.
And there goes the word support again. And what I also hear in that is that it's accepted. Nobody is judging you for being a parent and taking care of your responsibility, and the understanding that I may have to work a little bit differently, but I also am going to get the work done at a high level. And when you see this happening, how does it make you feel about the person on the other end? Because it would be concerning to me if someone abandoned their kids. What does it tell you about a person on the other end when they bring you into their home life and they bring you into their parent life? If you're interviewing them or you're working on a project with them, what does it say about them?
I love it. It brings out the genuine nature of the person. It brings the whole person and gives you insight that you may not have otherwise had.
Gloria, you ever have a situation where you're talking to a person and their kid entered the equation and you thought differently about them?
Yes, and it's so funny because I always end up saying the wrong thing. Like one of my employees, she her little daughter has these green rain boots, and she just could not get her daughter to take the green rain boots off. And so all of a sudden, we had the meeting later on in the day, and I saw that the rain boots were off, and I was like, oh, Lauren, that you finally got her to take the green rain boots off, and all of a sudden the little girl hears it, Annie, and I'm like, oh no. So Lauren's like, now I'm gonna go asking for them. Thanks, Gloria. So we have a lot of fun with it. I love kids, I love animals, so it just gives us something to connect on. Because when you work for someone that doesn't have children, like when I think about my own teammates, that could be something that they worry about inside, right? They're going to tell me that, but they may think that inside. So it's that much more important for me as a leader to demonstrate the things that I'm doing to kind of, that's a misconception. It could be a misconception, but it's a perception that if they have, it's real for them. So I have to work really hard to understand their perspective and make that conversation okay.
Yeah, and so much of a communication is unspoken because people have their own interpretation of things. And so if you don't state it plainly or you don't make an example of it, you're sometimes left with problems that could have been avoided. And so it's interesting to hear how proactive you are with addressing these different topics from mental health and parenting. And as we are here, we're doing this virtually. We would have been doing this in person. And so that's a whole different element of what's going on right now. And it adds stress to the equation and people have had to leverage different tools. How are you helping people just continue to learn and develop through this process as it's not normal for many individuals?
Yeah, so I'll start off. I would say making sure that you're leveraging all of the tools and resources around you and continually bringing them to the forefront. So career development, personal development doesn't change because we're in a hybrid workforce. So it's how we message it and it's how we help teammates understand that, okay, so traditionally you may have been in more of a classroom format to take, personal development classes. But now, on-demand e-learning is that much more important. One of the decisions that we just made as an organization was to go with a new vendor, for our learning content provider because the quality was so much better than what we had. It was an investment we hadn't planned for, but it's really important that the quality is also there. So we invested, some of our budget a little bit differently, and of course the company, fully supported it. So it's helping teammates develop themselves, but still understanding what the career journey can look like for them in the workplace, because this shouldn't slow it down. So one of the things we recently did as well was our career fair. So a virtual career fair for teammates to learn about, the different departments in the organization, because we were getting a little bit, or I was getting a little concerned that when you're not there in the office walking around bumping into people, you may not learn as much about some of the other organizations, or what are they accomplishing, what are their successes. And so, of course, organizationally, there's a lot communication-wise to get info out, but we also needed to take different measures to get the information to our teammates to fully grow their careers, and that was through a virtual career fair. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing to continue the growth and development of our teammates.
And Crystal, what about you? We spoke about how you just completely changed how you've done certain things and to people up to speed.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Yes. The one silver lining of COVID is that it forced us to think about our leadership training differently. If you can't get 40 leaders in a room together to go through some of the learning or the courses that we intend them to have, how can we do it? And so we revamped all of our leadership training to be virtual, to have a virtual component to it. And it has been working fabulously. And I think the good news is that we're now able to have, instead of having pockets of people in a training class together, we truly have global representation in these facilitated sessions that we're having. And they're learning anything from how to become a more effective leader, going through 360s to get the competencies that they need to be a good leader, to diversity, inclusion, and belonging training, to product training, all in a virtual environment, all with people who are in similar roles to they are, but in different geographies. So it's actually been, it took us a couple months to get the content kind of Zoom ready. Zoom is our preferred tool, but it is working fabulously. And we will continue on this journey, even post-COVID, when we are able to get back together.
What about the people that have resisted, or that they were tied to doing things in the way that is just unavailable right now? How do you convince them or get them up to speed?
We have been actually very fortunate that everyone made the turn very quickly and said, okay, I'm on board. What do I need to do? How do I need to do it? I think the hardest part is in the virtual world, we assign homework, for the sessions, where we didn't do that when we were live. And that is the part that's become a bit of a compliance, if you will, issue, getting people to actually do their homework and be ready to discuss the issues at the next session. But we're pleading, poking, prodding, yelling, all the same tools that you need to get people to do what they're supposed to do.
And the interesting thing that's happening is that talented people are still in demand and still on the move. Talk about the importance of making sure that you are continuing to develop and educate and help people learn in advance, so that your talent doesn't leave, and just the fact that you're actively looking to add those talented individuals to your company. Talk to me about that.
Yes, and last year, as a part of our employee survey, we got dinged a bit on our development. And so we had already planned to revamp some of our trainings and learnings. But when COVID hit, as I said, we completely went the other way. I do believe it's helping with our retention, because we're surveying the people who are going through the courses, et cetera, and they're saying that instead of answering, I intend to look for a job in the next 2 years, now they're answering, I intend to stay for the next 2 years. So big shift for us. But on the other side of the house, we are recruiting, we are looking for good talent, and we have hired several people in the last couple of months during the middle of COVID, only having met them on Zoom.
Wow.
For people to come to our companies. So trust me, good, talented people are looking, and you have to, at least in our world, you have to keep learning and development as a top priority so that you retain the good talent that you have.
Gloria, tell me what's going on in y'all's world.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say keeps me up at night is that good talent, if not developed or they don't feel engaged with the culture, will leave. They will be recruited. And so in March, so January, February, March of this year, we actually started to see, a decline in our turnover, which was great. And we had been taking a lot of active steps. Of course, COVID hits, and then you really saw it plummet, right? People were not leaving. And so one of the things, we've been, as an HR leadership team and working with our senior leaders, is just keeping a very close eye on the data, on who's leaving, why they're leaving. My team and myself, we conduct exit interviews of every teammate that leaves to understand what happened. Why did this person leave? Is there something that we need to do different? And leveraging that data to then change internal things that may need changing. And so I would say for folks who are watching, it's just, we can't assume that because there's a lot happening that folks aren't going to be looking for jobs. And keeping a pulse on that, leveraging the information that's around you, but just keeping those lines of communication open, both from a teammate experience standpoint, but then also, someone who's looking to grow and develop their career, do they feel like that's happening in this new virtual environment? Do we have strong succession plans? We're hiring like crazy, so that's great. But we want to make sure that we're also hiring for the right talent. So there's just always so many different balls in the air, and making sure that our leaders are thinking about all of the different components.
And I just throw in, don't forget about mentoring those you believe are ready to go to the next level. Just because we're in this COVID environment doesn't mean your mentoring should stop.
So, and it's a good place to start, where we have the importance of this human element of allyship, of mentorship, of sponsorship, of bringing people into your environment, welcoming people to see how you really operate with your family, your kids, and nature. The idea that you still have to measure what's not measured is ultimately lost. So paying attention to the data to see how your people are responding, how people are motivated, how they're engaged, what they feel about your company, and being able to marry these things together in a harmonious way so that you continue to do work at the highest levels. And man, I could have this conversation for another 3 hours with you. You're super talented. Man, I just got the ping that we're running out of time. And so it's a pleasure to spend time with you. So many talented people I know have been blessed by receiving the words that you have today. And we look forward to seeing everybody, hopefully in person next year.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mohamed.
Thanks so much, Mohamed. Thanks, Gloria. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.